we're doing what was done by the Western powers in the 1930s as Hitler was building up his war machine. You're going from day to day, and you're taking the easy path and avoiding the hard problems on the assumption that somehow or other you'll muddle through. And they came very close to not muddling through. France, of course, was conquered during World War II. Sometime in one of my columns recently, it may have been one of the last ones for all I know, I suggested that people who want to understand what is happening in the world today should read a book called The Gathering Storm, which is not about today. It's about the 1930s. But once you see this kind of feckless drifting in the face of fatal dangers, you'll understand what kind of thinking is going on, or lack of thinking, is going on today in the way that we're approaching the kinds of dangers we're facing now, which are far worse. Most people don't understand that for the first 3 years of World War II, the Western powers never won a single battle, literally, either in Europe or in Asia. They were beaten time and time again because the pacifists had gotten their way in the 1930s and prevented an adequate buildup of military forces, for which men paid their lives in those early years of World War II. Fortunately, at some point, the West learned their lesson. The United States entered, and with tremendous productive capacity, was able to supply itself, Britain, and the Soviet Union with the power of the weapons needed to defeat the Nazis and later the Japanese. But we're not going to have that kind of time in a nuclear war. You're not going to have 3 years to muddle around and get beaten and then come back. You will be lucky if we have a year to get beaten and still come back.
The Gathering Storm, as you said in that late column in December, was written by Winston Churchill. Is there anybody today, in your opinion, besides what you just said, that is suggesting that we ought to worry about the Gathering Storm in public life?
Oh, there are people who oh, you mean holding some official position?
Yeah, I mean, are there people that you respect?
Not that I've noticed. I mean, you don't get two Winston Churchills in one sentence, in one century. Ronald Reagan would be the closest analogy, but of course he too is gone. Again, we never seem to look at what are the inherent constraints within which you're operating, and what can you do within those constraints. I think of Reagan, when the Soviets started building up nuclear weapons in Eastern Europe, pointing at Western Europe. And Reagan responded by sending in American nuclear weapons in Western Europe, pointing in Eastern Europe. People were horrified and said, this man's going to get us into a war. We'll be annihilated. And fortunately, he disregarded them completely. And instead of getting us into a war, he brought the Cold War to an end. People who lived through the Cold War, with the fear of nuclear annihilation hanging over us all that time, have no idea what a feat that was. And he did it without firing a single shot at the Soviet Union. But he was never, I don't think he was ever considered for a peace prize. You don't get a Nobel Peace Prize for having produced peace. You get a Nobel Peace Prize for saying the kinds of things that people who are on the Nobel Committee think are going to promote peace, even though those things, such as the policies of Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain in the 1930s, said, which led to war.